Hi.
How wow.
I'm, like, obsessed with this for all those who can't see, Joanna is in her voiceover studio, but it looks like she is in a bunker,
It does. I
which
built it to look like that.
which feels apropos
I
to the
basically want it to feel like anytime I'm working that I'm in the womb.
yeah,
It's kind of that's what I was going for.
like, I wish I could be in that, in a womb more often. So, honestly, if you find me in your own voiceover studio, just
You come
it's
over
okay.
anytime. I'll
We'll
just I'll
just
just shut the door and leave you in there for as long as you need to
or
be
we
in
can
here.
go in there and snuggle and just cry, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, done. Done.
Um
I'll bring snacks and wine.
Great. I don't know in what order, but we can do both. Hi, everyone. I didn't even introduce you to our incredible guest. As you can tell, this is going to be a romp of a time. We're both in a mood. The incredible Joanna Carpenter is here with us today. I'm not going to introduce you. I'm going to throw it over to you, my dear. Who are you today or ever? Or what do you do? Or what's your vibe? Tell us anything.
I will say that today is how who I am is probably different than yesterday and different than tomorrow.
Yes,
And I'm just
amen.
gonna let that be what it is. So my name's Joanna Carpenter. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am an Asian American artist, activist, EDI educator and consultant, athlete based in New York City. I'm a cat mom. I kind of, at the moment, straddle the fence between the arts and hospitality. I've been in hospitality for coming up on 20 years now. Wow. Okay.
Mhm.
And I've been um, working in the arts for almost as long. So that's me today at this moment.
So, like, if we were to sum you up in one word, I'd say badass.
Thank you. I was gonna say chaos. We'll go with badass. I like it.
Yeah, it's perspective.
Thank you.
One's, like, from a
Tomato,
bird's eye
tomato.
view. Yeah, exactly, and again, daily changing, who knows?
Exactly, exactly.
Um, yeah, y'all, Joanna is somebody we were just talking about this before we even started this recording of I could talk to Joanna about anything. We have talked about everything,
Truly.
through EAC platforms, but also just generally, so choosing some conversations to narrow in today um, was difficult in that like I want to talk about all, but we don't have all the time.
Mhm.
But I can always bring you back. It's
I
not
mean,
like,
you say the word. You say the word. You
listen.
tend to ask and I jump, so
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to learn how to jump higher, but I think that falls into your athletic abilities. So
uh
anyway.
emotional trampoline. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I think today we decided to talk about, I guess by association, joy,
Mhm.
but maybe more narrowed down into this idea that through perhaps this pandemic that we're living through, but even beyond just as artists and humans,
Mhm.
the way in which social media has perhaps warped the way in which we experience joy,
Mhm.
perhaps our distractions in life taking us away from what it means to be joyful, or
Mhm.
what is joy. So I guess before we kind of jump in and let this conversation be whatever it is, I'd love to hear from you. What is joy for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm glad that you were down to kind of dive into this topic because for me personally, I've had to do a very intentional kind of like realigning of what joy means to me. And I've always been somebody who thought that she was the most the most lovable and the most receivable if she was the most consistent. So
Hmm.
I've kind of built so many aspects of my life around being consistent and reliable for other people. And over the last couple of years, I've started this journey into like really, really intentionally identifying things that bring me joy in an unapologetic fashion. And I've realized that consistency doesn't necessarily bring me joy. So, like, what makes me really happy today might not make me really happy tomorrow. And I think with the world that we live in now and with the state of things, yeah, I think it's very easy to forget how to prioritize um being happy because it just
Hmm.
I think yeah, yeah, the things that bring me joy right now run the gamut from sleeping in a little later than I normally would, all the way up to saying no to very large things. And it's almost like I feel like a little bit of an emotional newborn in terms of leaning into being unapologetic about the things that give me joy. I think that's harder
Yeah.
for people than we give it credit for being. Because very often we feel like we're a cog in a machine. So there's no happiness here. There's no crying in baseball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know people talk about this all the time, but I mean, both of us are in New York, and it's just like people joke about like their favorite place to cry in New York.
Oh, yeah.
And I used to think that that was like, oh, like you come to New York and you cry. It's like, no, it's that we actually are like experiencing the full process of emotions when you
Mhm.
live in a place like this, perhaps, that it's just like
Mhm.
you need to know where you can release. And so
Totally.
people being like, oh, yeah, Subway is my vibe. Or like, yeah,
Yeah.
I go to the specific bench on the specific spot and I stare at birds eating popcorn on the floor. And that's
Yeah.
where I can sob. And it's like, I
Yeah.
feel you.
Out in front of Telsey. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. When was the last time I went there?
It's
Unclear.
been a minute.
It's been a hot second. Yeah, I think I relate so deeply to all you were saying, and I feel like there's this fine line though of like, and I don't know if you experience this or if you have pondered this for yourself of I too am a late sleeper, always have been. I'm
Mhm.
definitely a night owl. And
Mhm.
there's this idea of it's not guilt. I'm over that now because I enjoy my sleep. But
Nice.
there, thank you.
Well
I know.
done.
Thank you so much. It's taken a while.
Sometimes just moving past the guilt, you're just like, "Wow,
Truly,
a whole
and
new
it's
world."
and it's in me, so the guilt is very there. But this idea of like, well, when is it actually helping or when is it actually because I'm sad? Like the
Mm.
depressive aspect of it, right? I feel like perhaps maybe this is the question with this idea of finding things that perhaps take you away from this consistency, right?
Mhm.
We're on this rat race of let's
Mhm.
move, move, move. We have to be productive. We have to show face
Mhm.
if we don't do these things and blah, 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 blah. And then therefore I'm now void of joy, right? But what if it is this moment where you are giving yourself the space to fill your time with what you think is joy, but it's actually just the space to grieve or the space to process. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense, and I have 2 thoughts on it. The first thought is the body keeps the score. So I think if something that brings you joy is, sleeping because that's what your depressed, anxious body tells you you need, then there is nothing that should take that away from you. When we're depressed, we're very sleepy. We're very tired. You know, I know somebody who for the last probably month has been sleeping until noon every day that he's not working. And, there's been conversations about like, "Oh my god, am I worthless?" Like, blah, blah, and it's like, "No, you're not. Your body is telling you what it needs." And you have to honor that. Like, you don't really have a choice. Like, you have this body, honor it. And then I think the other side of things too is that, um, again, giving ourselves room for oh, my watch is going off in the background. Shut up. It'll stop in a second. I'm sorry. Um,
It's fine. I have a person stomping in the hallway and I'm like clicking mute to be like, until they leave.
New York City is
Just
chaos. Everything is
yeah,
chaos.
everything is
What day
chaos.
is it? Where am I? Who are you? Um, but the other aspect of it is too, is that we are now kind of what feels like floating in space a little bit in terms of this newfound ability and opportunity to identify other things that give us joy, even if it's for a moment, that we may not have allowed ourselves to experience before. You know, you and I are artists, right? So
Mhm.
pre-pandemic, our lives were you are catapulted out of bed early in the morning and you do not stop until late at night. And, the old myth of our productivity or our value is tied to our productivity was very much tied into that. We identified ourselves with how many auditions we successfully went to, how many callbacks we got, how many submissions we were sending, how many touch
Mhm.
points with our management team, like how we were balancing the side hustle, the multiple side hustles on top of, like eating or like drinking a smoothie once a day and working out and staying fit. And, all of that has shattered. It's all been shattered. It's all been taken away. It's now in this sense of kind of cocooning and being rebirthed into something new. And with that, our sense of identity and our sense of intention about how we move through space, and that includes joy, is getting rewritten, which I think is really, really important. Um, because we, especially those of us who are artists, because we are naturally empathic, therefore we tend to be a sponge for the emotions of the world at large and our community as a microcosm. Um, we tend to put joy on the back burner because we are so busy doing
Mhm.
that we've never been allowed to feel, and yet artists and creators and creatives feel more deeply than anyone in the world. So I'm seeing a lot of people in our community and across the country really, um, going, "Uh, I think a farmhouse in Vermont makes me happy, so I think I'm gonna do that, and maybe that'll change, I don't know. I'm gonna offer myself malleability and flexibility to change." Because
Mhm.
now I think a lot of people are going, "Oh, well, somebody else has been telling me my entire life and my entire career that, uh, this thing that I do is right, and therefore that can make me happy. Me being right for somebody else is what's gonna make me happy." And now a lot of us are standing back and I'm, I'm me, I'm profane, d fuck that. Like what why? So it's funny because I think a lot of people are like, "Okay, we're entering junior year of COVID. Are we done yet? Are
Which,
we
by the
through
way,
it
is my
yet?"
favorite phrase. I shouldn't be so delighted by that phrase, but it
But
is.
it's so
I
relatable.
know. Oh, yeah, this is junior year of co which
Junior
is
year of
terrifying,
COVID.
but
It's terrifying.
yeah.
And also, I think there's a sense from the larger community that, like, we should be, uh, hitting certain checkpoints of, interpersonal growth right now, and some people haven't hit that, and they're going, "Well, what's the next productivity guidepost?" And it's like, "I don't know, maybe you need to fucking sit down and, like, do a deep self-analysis, and just because there's a timestamp on how much time we've spent in this mindset does not mean that your emotional, spiritual, personal, physical growth is gonna happen directly in line with the timestamp of the world. Does that make sense?
No, it makes complete sense to me. I think the other thing too is, right, we're redefining what it means to be an artist and
Yeah,
also what it means to be a human, right?
yeah.
These guideposts that we have had that we've looked towards
Mhm,
as ways of making sense of the world that we're living in
mhm,
aren't what we can go to anymore. So
mhm.
they're not that they're the rule book that has been is beyond flawed and broken and needs to
Yeah,
be like torn up and burned. But
yeah.
there was a guidebook for people to at least reference to see, like, what of this do I want to learn more about? Or
Yeah,
what chapter do I want to investigate more? Or which chapter do I resonate with? And
yeah.
like, so there was at least something that we were all kind of funneling towards. But I think now that's kind of been thrown to the wayside. And so there's a lot of scrambling to figure out, well, what is quote unquote right?
Mhm.
And this idea that really there is no one right way, right? I say this all the time, but
Yeah,
there's only the right for you.
yeah.
But it feels really isolating to be on this path to like finding that right thing for you when you're like, but I'm alone, literally in isolation because of COVID, but also
Mhm.
because of the state of the world being what it is.
It's very isolating to choose yourself. That
Yep.
is something that I have learned over the last couple years because I have made, an unshakable commitment to myself that changes and evolves and grows each and every day. And the universe is kind and generous enough to plant things in my path to serve as reminders, um, both pleasant and unpleasant, to choose myself. And the other thing the other thing that is like a barnacle in my brain these days, especially as it pertains to social media, which you and I talk about a lot,
Mhm.
and the impact of social media and what we're seeing and what we are consuming, is the commitment to suffering that a lot of artists have made. There are some
Mhm.
artists that I'm watching that are kind of like in my immediate circle that I'm actually deeply concerned about because the double-edged sword of social media is that you have a global reach,
Right.
and then on the other side of that, you have global consumption. And so I'm seeing people who committed to doing the right thing when COVID hit. And that has now morphed into this commitment to stew in, swirl in, spin the wheels in, and regurgitate things that are deeply painful and deeply toxic. And we tend to forget that when we share certain things on social media, unless your following is expanding at a rapid clip, you are yelling into an echo chamber. And that is not to say that the things that you have to say are not important and beautifully valuable. Um, but I'm finding that I'm seeing people so committed to the suffering that they are now hurting themselves because it feels like the only option that we have. There is so much pain, there is so much loss, there's so much devastation, and it's COVID and it's everything political. I mean, like, what's happening for the Jewish community, what has been happening for the past however many years, and now people are just paying attention because somehow paying attention to anti-Semitism is, like, just a fresh thing now.
Yeah.
What's been happening to the Jewish community, what's been happening to my Asian community,
Mhm.
on top of everything else, there is a sense of relentlessness and enormity to the pain that I think a lot of people are just kind of defaulting to sitting in and, again, regurgitating because it's so overwhelming, like, what can you do? And at the same time, you have to say something, you have
Yeah.
to do what you feel like you can do to hopefully change some small speck of a corner of the universe, and I think what that is leading to is people so caught up in the suffering that they do not know how to choose to pinpoint joy for themselves.
Mhm.
And here's the thing, community is very important. Community is the thing that helps us survive. Like, humans are tribal by nature, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's science. And at the same time, nobody can identify your joy for you.
Right.
And so, to a certain extent, I can reach out to somebody that I'm concerned about and say, "Hey, I'm concerned about you. How are you taking care of yourself? Is there anything that you need?" That's as far as I can go for that person. That person has to go, "I think I need to step away from Instagram for a day and, like, go read a book, and that's gonna refill my cup."
Mhm.
And my question kind of at large is, like, how do we honor the world that we live in now while also refusing to let it define our day to day? Because I've been kind of screaming about this recently. It is, I'm somebody who's been surrounded by death like all my life, but in particular in the last year or so, I just keep losing people left and right, and it's
Mhm.
unexpected, and they're too young, and they're too smart, and they're too talented. And I got hit with the realization last year that my job is to live the best life that I possibly can. Because me wallowing in despair and sitting in pain does not help my friend who died. It doesn't
Mhm.
bring them back. It doesn't change the fact that they're dead. Us sitting in despair and choosing to sit in suffering in a lot of ways, in ways that are in our control as opposed to ways that are not out of our control, that doesn't help. It doesn't make the world a better place. So the question is, like, how can we as individuals and as parts of humanity and society and community, as artists, how can we choose to live our best life so that we honor the losses that we have experienced? And I think people are treating them as very siloed, very disparate things, and they're not. It is our job to live the best ways that we can. As long as our happiness and our joy is not coming at the expense of someone else, um, we have to.
Yeah.
And it's a very unpopular opinion right now. It's a very, very unpopular opinion to say, "I am choosing joy today," because there is so much to suffer
Yeah.
for and by and about and with. There's so much, and I do think that we can do both. I think we can honor all the shit while still going, "And you know what? I'm gonna take a lot of joy in, like, writing this poem or making this coffee or spending time with this person. I'm gonna do that because we have one life." I mean,
Yeah.
regardless of your belief system, this moment right now, you can't ever get that back, right? So how are we caring for that?
I have so many thoughts, but I guess I just want to dovetail right off of what you just asked, which is the or stated about the balance of both. For you specifically, do
Mhm.
you curate these moments of joy? Like, are you purposeful about, like, this is my day, I see my structure, I
Mm.
know that these things are maybe things I have to do and therefore don't fill my cup, and therefore I must insert these moments of joy? Or is it more just like generally funneling your mindset into the state of joy as you move through your day?
Um, it's closer to the former, but not as formulaic.
Okay.
I am fairly green in my journey of allowing myself to feel joy. And what I mean by that is I have lived, especially the last, 12 or 13 years that I've lived in New York, I have lived at the behest of other people and at other people's ability to write my paycheck. And so I am an absolute expert at putting aside my own feelings in order to accomplish.
Yeah.
And the clarity around simply identifying an aspect of work or an aspect of my life or something that I, like, feel like I should put on my calendar. The rebellious act of simply going, "But that doesn't make me happy. Do I have to do that?" Goes back to a deeply rooted learning that I had from my childhood, which was it was stomped out of me pretty young that, uh, like, my own preferences were kind of, like, invalidated from a very young age, and so I kind of feel very childlike in the sense that I move through my day, and I'll get, like, distracted by something, whether it's, like, playing with the cats or, like, looking at a stupid TikTok or something like that, that will just make me really happy for that moment, and it becomes a conversation with the voice in my head that goes, "No, but you should be doing X."
Right.
And then I go, "But I don't want to, and also I can get X done in 20 minutes when I'm done playing with the cat." You
Yeah.
know? So it almost feels very, juvenile. Like, I feel like
Mhm.
a little kid in a lot of ways because I'm deeply in tune with my body, and I'm listening to how my body responds to certain things. And there have been more extreme situations recently where, like, things have been strenuous at one of my jobs, and I'll just be like, I'm gonna leave this meeting now and I'm gonna go to the gym because
Mhm.
that's what's gonna make me happy because that's what I need to show up fully for any sort of conversation. So it's
Yeah.
very different day by day. It's definitely not formulaic, but through the exploration of that and how I have a physiological response to certain stimuli, um, I've been able to bookmark certain things, reading certain types of books, writing, or, like, journaling at, like, a certain time of day, making sure certain routines are preserved. So, like, I'll wake up and I'll throw on a quick 3-minute guided meditation and just listen to that instead of diving right into Instagram or my emails, like, the shit can wait. Like, these little things because the other thing too, and we've talked about this a bunch, I feel like, where there's this kind of idea that in order to have this, like, broad-reaching joy, it has to be a seismic investment. It has to be
Mhm.
huge, travel, it has to be, like, buying an apartment, like, whatever. When in actuality, um, it's kind of like James Clear's Atomic Habits, where it's like, it's all the little things that add up to the big thing. It's all the little things, like, I don't need to be on an island right now. I mean, it'd be nice, but, like, I don't need to be on an island right now, but I do need my, like, morning coffee routine in place because that brings me joy, and it's all those little pinpricks of commitment to self that lead up to this overall sense of kind of, like, satisfaction, which we deserve that.
Yeah.
You don't have to earn that. Like, you
Yeah.
don't have to prove that you're worthy of those things that make you happy, and I just, it's a newfound commitment for me to, like, commit to self in that way, and it feels so obvious,
No, but
but,
it's
like, we
not.
don't do it.
No, it's just also not taught to us, especially
Mhm.
as women. We're certainly not told that we can embrace that part of ourselves, right?
Ooh,
Because
girl.
I mean, that's a whole other conversation that we
Well, if
could
we're
come
not in
back to.
service of other people, then
Exactly.
what are we
Mhm.
doing? Mhm.
Um, I mean, I guess I just wanna offer kind of piggybacking off of this, and then I wanna double back to what you said earlier, but, um, there's this really wonderful exercise, I forget when I first did it. I'm a huge list person,
Mhm.
just because I'm very visual, so if I don't see something in front of my face, I can spin in my head forever, and I think I have it all, which I do. I hold way too many things up there, but if it's not out, right, there's literally
It's a good
science about.
brain, though.
Thank you so much. I like to think so too.
Yes.
But there's science about getting the stuff out of your head, and onto a piece of paper or into
Mhm.
something artistic or
Mhm.
getting it out of you. It's expression. That's literally what we are in the field doing, right? But
Totally.
there's an activity of, you put your, and this also sounds like, oh, it's so easy. Why haven't we done this? But you put your timer on for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, if that feels like what you can handle,
Yeah.
and you stream of consciousness, write down all of the things that fill you with joy.
Mm.
Um, and we're talking like minuscule things like a wiped clean countertop,
Yes.
opening a new, like opening your dishwasher if you're so lucky to have one, and like seeing the steam pop out, a newly
Mhm.
paved road, like really like small little moments of joy. And if you really let yourself like look around you, just in the room that you're in, and then begin to expand one circle beyond that over and over, like outside my apartment, outside my street, outside my neighborhood, outside and keep going and going and going, you recognize like not only is it gratitude for all the things in the world that you can appreciate, but there's this idea of these specific little details that do fill you with joy, that when you start to move yourself out of your different circles into these other spheres in your life, you are actually able to physically pinpoint, oh, right, that tree that's on this street that I love seeing its leaves fall. I'm walking by it today. Joy.
Yeah.
Oh, the one fence that like looks like it's painted from 1822, and for some reason every other part of the fencing has been painted, and why not this one?
Yeah.
Like these little details allow you to fill yourself up with tangible joy on a little
Yes.
day to day.
Yes.
And I want to invite anyone who's listening into trying that, if this is something that does resonate with you, just because we tend, I'll speak for myself, I tend to take for granted the things that I have in my life that could
Yes.
fill me with joy. And I'm not being purposeful around the ways in which the artwork that I put on my gallery wall that I was so excited about, like that fills me with joy. I
Which is beautiful, by the way. It's
thank
so
you so
pretty.
much. I have so much artwork. And now I didn't realize that I had more walls than the art that I had, which I thought was impossible, but I somehow need to accrue more art. So if anybody has like great artists, or is an artist, a visual artist specifically, and wants to like send me their art and or like have me purchase their art, let me know.
I have a guy I'll send you.
We love a guy.
My friend Kazi, he is probably one of the most brilliant painters I have ever encountered in my
Amazing.
life. Oh, so good. Yeah, I'll send
I
you his
mean,
stuff.
it's like so much of my wall is friends. It's my art. It's
Yeah.
art that I've accrued and accumulated from my travels. It's just
Mm.
anyway. But that's a fun little exercise I just want to offer, kind of spinning off of what you were saying.
Yeah.
But going back to the social media situation, which God, it's like, it's like part of me is like, do I even want to? Because like my
Pause
shoulders
for a
just
heavy
like,
sigh. Yeah, I
I
saw
know,
that. I saw that.
like my shoulders automatically just like tensed. But I do
I
think
think we
it's
should
like,
talk about social media, though. I think this is
exactly.
deeply important.
Yeah,
Yes, yes,
it's a
yes.
necessary conversation, and also,
Yeah,
unfortunately, it's a necessary evil that is dictating so much of our lives right now, whether we like it or not.
truly, truly.
Where it's this beautiful connector of what you're saying with
Mhm.
community and your reach. It's how we've built EAC. It's through
Yeah.
social media, like these incredible artists who've come through and are now a part of this community. Frankly, is because of social media, in addition
Yeah.
to obviously people I've worked with and such. But like, there's some gorgeous beauty, which is, I think, that's what the original intent was for
Mhm.
social media, and then
Mhm.
obviously it became a tool for commerce and money and consumerism. Anyway,
Because
so going
always.
because
We can't not have money.
are we living in a capitalist society, or
Definitely, and it's juicy.
we love? Okay.
We love.
Y'all, Joanna and I spent months. This is actually, I think, when we like solidified friendship, despite how we were literally across the country from one another. We spent
Mhm.
months in the pandemic 2020 summer calling senators
I remember that. Oh
for
my god.
pandemic relief. And I
Remember
feel
that?
like, so
Those
I just,
fucks didn't listen.
unreal. I just feel like seeing and looking at you and talking about capitalism just brings me back to not very different, but a relatively different time.
Wild. It feels like it was a decade ago when
It
really
actually does.
it was a year and a half ago,
I know.
which is
Yeah.
crazy.
But going back to social media, this incredibly complex universe. So, this idea of social media as this tool and yet this double edged sword that you kind of feel like you're preaching and yelling into an abyss or a
Mhm.
bubble based off of algorithms and
Mhm.
the way in which Instagram has decided for people who and what they should see.
Mhm.
What do you feel in this moment? Because I recognize this changes, but what do you feel in this moment then is our responsibility for the causes that we do feel deeply passionate about,
Mm.
recognizing that that is, in essence, some version of quote unquote suffering or
Yeah.
perpetuating suffering. But at the same time, if they're core values or core belief systems or things that really mean too much to you to not say something,
Mhm.
where is that balance?
Oh, I love this question so much. Okay, so I'm gonna preface this by saying I'm not going to tell anyone what to do, but I will
Mhm.
share, kind of the evolution of my process for,
Great.
dealing with social media, which has actually had a big burst of clarity, just over the last couple of weeks, actually. So I used to focus Facebook is a cesspool of stupidity and chaos. I am not really on Facebook anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I actually despise Facebook, and I was a late joiner to Facebook. I didn't get on until, like, 2009, 2010 because I was just like, "This is stupid." And now I'm back to that. I feel like it's stupid. Instagram has been personally my main platform for communicating my messages. Like, you know this about me. Some of the EAC community knows this about me. I'm a huge fighter for equal rights, social issues, female identifying issues, abortion. You know, all of this stuff. Um, and that has been how I've communicated that. And my platform has grown very organically because of that, because of my version, my particular brand of activism. Um, I've realized recently that part of not even part, the majority of the self-care work that I need to do in order to take care of myself so that I can show up fully for the important conversations, for the suffering, if you will, is to protect my energy. So I very often, from a visual perspective, I feel like my personal energy is this kind of like golden web of light that is around me. And the more I bare my innermost soul in public places, especially social media, the more I am pushing out that web of energy and dimming it because it's getting stretched too thin. And so I had to spend a lot of time towards the end of last year really trying to figure out the balance that you're talking about. And for me personally, I've realized that with, my entrance into TikTok, which I've been so skeptical and cynical about TikTok from the jump, I'm like, "This is stupid," and I'm now obsessed. You win, TikTok, you win. Because the reason being is because I love using social media for 2 reasons. The first reason is that I can entertain people. There is nothing in this world that brings me more joy than having made someone laugh. I
Mhm.
don't care if it's 1 person, I don't care if it's 1,000 people. Did I make you laugh? There is no feeling that is more fulfilling for me. There's really not. And then also, something that I'm deeply passionate about is shining a light on the things that are broken, the things that are wrong, the underdog, the people who are unheard, unseen, unappreciated, abused, left behind, you name it. So you've got a really interesting dichotomy here. So what I realized is that when it comes to Instagram, I need to pull back my energy in terms of how much I am bearing the deepest parts of my soul because that is a level of vulnerability that the world doesn't necessarily deserve.
Mhm.
I can speak about the issues that are important. I can consistently continue to make a case for fighting for the people who deserve to be seen, deserve to be heard. I can continue doing that. None of that is going to change. And also, I can protect and preserve my own emotional capital. And we talk a lot about emotional capital.
Mhm.
I can preserve that and keep that intact so that I am psychically, spiritually safe and whole at the same time. And it's just it's a simple redirect of how I speak about things and how personal I make it. There are 75 hills that I will die on, and all of them are social justice
Yeah.
issues. And so then how do I scratch the creative itch that Instagram started as? Remember when Instagram started and we were all sharing really, like, grainy photos of food and our shoes and, like,
Those
stupid shit?
filters,
Oh
those
my god,
filters,
never
like the
forget.
sepia with the black
Yes.
border
Oh, the
and
black
the
border.
blur.
Never forget. Like, so, like,
Unreal.
that used to be something that was joyful, that was community driven, that was silly, that was playful. That is now TikTok. TikTok is like, I love TikTok because you are entirely at the mercy of chance. There is no control over the algorithm to chase, unlike Instagram, which is why I think so many of us get into a tizzy because we're like, I gotta, like, bet kowtow to the algorithm on Instagram. TikTok, I have made so many stupid videos that make me cackle out loud, and I just vomit them into TikTok, and I don't have to care how people respond to them because I think they're funny and a few other people think they're funny, and it scratches that creative itch and that kind of, like,
Mhm.
self-indulgent, "Let me entertain you, I'm an actor" vibe, and there's cross-pollination between the 2 platforms, and it is all done entirely within my personal boundaries of how much emotional output I can afford to give other people, because the underlying thing here is that I am a creator, I am a creative, I am a storyteller, and I need to have an outlet to do that. And also, I'm somebody who, like everybody else, has lived through 2.5 years of a global pandemic that has devastated me emotionally, blessedly not physically, even though I had COVID for Christmas. Happy holidays.
Yes.
Yes. Um, it's been devastating. And so my that's something that's bringing me joy very intentionally, and I am very proud of the fact that I feel like I've found the balance. I've found the balance on social media that I want. Now, all of that is to say that's gonna be completely different for everybody else, and
Mhm.
I would always encourage people to speak about the issues that are the most important to you, advocate for others, continue to listen, continue to learn, because as we know that this work is infinite. The advocacy work is infinite. There's always someone to fight for and with and against, someone, something. Um, and also, going back to the premise of this entire conversation, while you are doing that, while you are using your voice for good and for change, understand the limits of your own emotional capacity and do not push beyond that, because you can't pour from an empty cup, and you are not going to be able to be of service if you're just, like, squeezing blood from a stone
Mhm.
effectively. You can't do that. So that's kind of how I've found my personal relationship with social media, and it's actually the most comfortable, and the most happy that I've felt about social media in general, basically since I got on Instagram in, like, 2013.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, that's yeah, I it's been a very I feel, I have, yeah, so many feelings happening in this current moment about all of it. I am having a moment because as an actor, creator, performer myself, I have this
Mhm,
really weird relationship, frankly, with social media, of within
mhm,
with my face. And
mhm,
I've actually but it's been something that with EAC, I'm being super vulnerable, but here we are. Like I've never ever been face driven with this community because
mm,
it's a community. It's not my community. It's a
mhm,
community. And I just happen to be like spearheading the way in which we can facilitate it. Right. But putting my face on that has always been really, really difficult for me.
mm,
And I struggle with that also in my own space where I have all these creative ideas and all these wacky, silly whatevers. And I could, in theory, be showing up for myself in a way that frankly makes me more visible and allows me to be showing my face and myself in probably more active video form on TikTok, on Instagram, what have you. But there's this weird thing that I have about, and that's my own thing that I need to work on and continue working on in therapy, about just taking up space. But
mhm,
there's this really interesting, um, you know, idea around what it means to um, show up in these ways where you have to be all of you all the time. And then in that in itself is its own form of draining. Forget even
mhm,
all the other stuff that we're dealing with in the world and in society and all the suffering and blah, blah, blah. Like it's still this way of like the cost that you having to show up as your honest, authentic self, which is the only way I ever want to show up. And it's the only
mhm,
way I ever do try to show up.
mhm.
That does come at a cost, right?
It does.
So I guess the other thing is that I want to ask about this for you is do you just stop when you're like I'm done with say TikTok videos, or is it more like you're like no, I actually now that I've discovered this well, it's like endless.
That actually changes from day to day
Cool.
because, you know, I'm not gonna make any sort of prescriptions on what you feel like are your personal, connections and issues with your own visibility. But I think for me, it starts with listening to your body, right? Again, the body keeps a score. When I get a certain feeling in my core, like right between my upper stomach and my diaphragm, it
Mhm.
feels like a small ache. And the second that kicks in, I'm like, oh, gotta go. And like, whether that's from an in person situation or a social media situation. So I just listen to that. I also think that this is going to sound egotistical. and I don't mean it to, but I think it's something that everybody needs to take stock of and find a way to remind themselves of, which is access to you is a privilege. Access to certain parts of you especially is a privilege. And that's not to say that there's a hierarchy of like, "Oh, because I'm saying this, like, I'm better." That's not what I mean at all. What I mean is that the parts of us that are so, core to who we are, like our little soul mirrors, right? Like the glitter that comes out of us when we share our vulnerable parts. Those things are precious gifts. And the nature of social media means that not everybody is going to appreciate that. Some
Yeah.
people will, which is why I recommend being hyper specific about what you share with people. And sometimes everybody's journey with it is different. Everybody's journey with their visibility, especially as artists, because we as much as we want to avoid saying this, we still live and work in an industry that is deeply flawed and deeply broken and entirely aesthetically driven.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's why we still have fat phobia on Broadway and in Hollywood. That's why we still have, I mean, just like colorism, just like running rampant and
Mhm.
everybody going, well, you're not ethnic enough and you're too ethnic, like all this fucking bullshit. And at the end of the day, because have to kind of like those are the edges on our sandbox right now, I do think it behooves us as artists to be hyper specific about the glitter that we give to other people, especially via social media. And so you are different from me. So if your instincts are going, this doesn't feel right to share, or it doesn't feel right to share in this way, then that's something about you that you reserve for the people who are in your innermost sanctum who deserve that access. And it doesn't mean you can't advocate for things. It doesn't mean you can't put yourself out there. It doesn't mean that you can't say or be certain ways, but you can find ways to do that that preserve what you feel is your integrity in that moment and also take care of yourself. Does that make sense?
Completely,
Okay.
completely. I mean, a lot of it is also just, you know, me recognizing that none of it fucking matters.
You know
Like I think that's just really like, honestly,
Yeah,
it's the "fuck it" mentality that I
yeah,
have with so much of my life that for some fucking reason, every fucking word right now is gonna be "fuck," but, like, for
that's
some
okay.
fucking
Flippity flop,
reason.
fuck, fuck.
Oh, yeah, please, for some fucking reason, when it comes to these arenas, I'm still, navigating the ways in which the balance works, that it seems
Yeah.
like you've navigated it quite decently at this point in time, that I'm going to continue investigating for myself. But
Mhm,
it's a really, I think you nailed it in that it's a very individualized journey, and
mhm,
the intuition that you have, or that one has within one's own body, to be like, this is a yes, this is
mhm,
a
mhm,
no,
mhm,
and then acting on that,
mhm,
and
mhm,
trusting that your instinct is telling you something,
mhm,
that perhaps listening to it is a wonderful choice.
mhm.
Um, you're going to say.
No, no, I was just going back to what you were saying about how there's, a cost, right? Like, there's a cost to putting yourself out there, and what you were just saying reminded me, to say this, which is there's always gonna be a cost.
Hmm.
Even if it's positive reinforcement, even if it's like a silly TikTok video that you're putting out where you're, like, trying on an accent, you know what I mean? There's always gonna be a cost because we're living, breathing human beings, and the things that we do and moving through space takes energy.
Yeah.
I think it becomes a question of how much you wanna spend
Yeah.
on certain things,
Or how
right?
much literally do you have in your pockets to spend at the time?
Yeah, yeah,
How wealthy are you in that moment?
yeah, and
Or
that could
how
that could
broke are
change.
you?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly, and it's when we stop listening to the shoulds from the
Mhm.
outside, even if the outside shoulds are coming from people with the best of intentions, whether
Yeah.
it's our agent, our parents, like, whatever, when we stop listening to the external shoulds and start really, really trusting ourselves and our innermost knowing and leading with that, then that's when we make the decisions that are the best for us. And for some people, that's gonna be really uncomfortable and scary because their innermost knowing is gonna tell them to shut the fuck up for 6 months,
Correct.
and that's okay,
Yep.
you know? It's weird and it's squishy.
Yeah. Um, I adore you so
I adore
much.
you.
Before we wrap up our time, despite the fact that I actually can continue this conversation, and I know you could too, for hours,
Forever.
forever, we'll be here forever.
Okay. We're devolving.
This is the
We're
sign that
spiraling, guys, we're spiraling.
we
Send help.
Before it's full spiral. Um, is there anything that you feel is perhaps an exercise or a tool or a resource that when
Mhm,
it comes to whether it is this idea of discovering joy or whether it's
mhm,
one's balance with the way in which one shows up on these social spheres or the way in which one engages with all of the universal personal suffering that perhaps then they feel a responsibility to all of these things that we've
mhm,
discussed today,
mhm.
are there any lingering tangible somethings that you may have on your mind?
Um, Tangible, not so much. Physical, yes,
Great.
because I think so much of this joy is intrinsic. Um, Somebody else or something or money or whatever can make us happy, but joy is intrinsic, and what I would encourage everybody to do is give yourself permission to come back to yourself and listen. We listen to ourselves last so often. We listen to our bodies last. Even those of us who are very, like dancers, actors, like like these elite athletes that artists are, no matter what you do in the arts. Um the You must choose to come back to yourself and stop letting the outside world dictate how you are allowed to feel and what you should do at any given moment. And that sounds kind of like weird and kitschy, but I really, really believe that. And I really, really believe that I was only able to clearly identify things that made me joy so that I could continue to be a good person and show up for the things and people who needed me once I stopped ignoring myself.
Mhm,
And once I started really listening and checking in with my physiological reactions to certain things, um, the pain is not gonna go away. The violence is not gonna go away. The loss, the sense of loss, all the things that we miss, all the things that can never come back again, that's not gonna change. So, what can we do in order to show up for ourselves so that we can show up for others, is to come back to ourselves. So that means, like, taking 2 minutes, like you were saying earlier, set a timer, you know, and check in with yourself. How is your breathing? Where are you holding tension? Does your stomach hurt? Very often, this like core line of energy that
mhm.
runs up the center of our body. And you know this, that tells us so much if we just care to listen. And that knowing, that commitment to knowing yourself will expand out into how you find joy, how you deal with family, how you deal with social media, how you deal with the chaos of the arts industry right now, how you seek out things to further your life. Um, so at the risk of, oversimplifying it, like come back to you and listen to you and like tune out the noise. There's always going to be noise. It doesn't mean you have to listen to it.
And on that note, I'm endlessly grateful for you. I adore you to pieces.
I adore
You
you.
will you will find me in your bunker.
Come over. I have snacks
I
and
can always
kitties.
I'm gonna bring snacks, and I'd bring Walter, my little
Yes.
pupster. I don't know,
Oh,
do
yes.
your cats does Zelda hang out with dogs?
Zelda will. Lola will probably hide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think Walter will try. I don't think he fully understands cat dynamic yet, but maybe this is like a play date waiting to
I
happen.
mean,
So,
Zelda's like a small person, so
I mean,
it's
so
fine.
is Walter. So I think this is a match made in heaven.
It's gonna be so good.
Um, thank you.
Thank you. I love and appreciate you.
I love and appreciate you too.